can be found on page 42. So now we'll go on to chapter 4. And this one, again, has quite a few videos, and we're going to go more into depth on some of those maneuvers, like turning, signaling, lane changing, things like that. So this whole chapter is on intersections and turns, and it starts on page 57 of your driver's guide. So starting on page 58, we're going to talk about intersections and the right of way. So many of you have probably heard the term right of way, but some people forget what the right of way means, or they use it all the time. They're like, I had the right of way, or I was there first. But this video is going to demonstrate what the right of way means and how you would default to it, especially in uncontrolled intersections.
Since there are no traffic lights or stop signs, drivers must follow the right-of-way rules of the road. These rules give one vehicle or pedestrian the privilege to pass through traffic before other road users. We'll go over some of the general right-of-way rules here. However, consult your state's driving manual to see what applies to your state. Pedestrians have the right-of-way at intersections. In general, the vehicle that arrives first at an uncontrolled intersection has the right-of-way. In the event of a tie, give the car on your right the right-of-way. You must yield the right-of-way to fire, ambulance, police, and other emergency vehicles responding to an emergency. Safely pull over to the side of the road and allow it to pass. Remember to think defensively. Don't assume that another driver at an uncontrolled intersection is going to yield the right-of-way to you. Be prepared to slow down or stop when other cars are at the intersection. As always, be on the lookout for pedestrians, children, bikers, pets, and other road users.
So that quickly demonstrated the right-of-way. So if you're approaching an intersection, the right-of-way usually defaults to when you're at an uncontrolled intersection. So what that means is when you go to an intersection that does not have signs or lights attached to it. But it could also apply even if there are signs, like commonly you'll see four-way stops is what they're called. When you come to an intersection where everybody has a stop sign, then you would default to the right-of-way rules. But if you have come to an intersection where only one direction has stop signs, the other side has yield signs, that means that if you're facing a stop sign, you have to come to a stop. And the person who has a yield, they're able to proceed. So they would have the right of way based on how the signs are positioned. But in situations where there are no signs or there are no traffic lights or everybody equally has a four-way is facing a stop sign, then the rules of right of way would apply. So as the video mentioned, a vehicle who arrives first typically has the right of way or will have the right of way. You would give them courtesy that they were there sooner so that they would just go through the intersection before you after you've come to a complete stop, and then it would be your turn after that. And that would go in order of sequence too. If you have an intersection where there's a lot of vehicles coming from every single direction, then you guys take turns for whoever was there gets to go next, and then another vehicle pulls up and then he gets to go next. So it's kind of like taking turns through that intersection and having the courtesy to pay attention to who got there first. But in the event where those vehicles show up at the exact same time as each other, then you're like, well, who goes first? You would default to the vehicle that's on the right. So you would look at him. If he's on the left of you and you're on the right of him, you get to go first as the right of way rules apply. But like the video said, don't assume that they're not going to go. Sometimes they may not have been paying attention, or say they thought they got there a second before you, something like that. So if you're going to go ahead and take the right of way, just make sure that those other vehicles are aware that you're moving and that they fully stop, so that you guys are both not entering the intersection at the same time. If two vehicles arrive at the same time and they're on the opposite side of each other, so you guys are facing each other at an intersection going in opposite directions, then you guys can proceed together if you're both going straight, or if one of you are turning right, things like that. But say one of those vehicles are turning left and you have to cross each other's paths, you would wait until it's safe. You would let that vehicle go straight through, and then you would make your left-hand turn, just like any other situation. So the right of way is all about using really good judgment, and making sure that you're paying attention to who is there first, who's on the right side of who's turning left or right, and how can we, cross this intersection together safely. It also mentioned that if directions are given by a police officer, so say you're in an intersection and the lights went out, there was a power shortage or something like that, and regularly you would have green and yellow and red lights controlling the flow of traffic. In those situations, most of the time they're going to have, you would either, if there's no peace officer around, then everybody would default to the right-of-way rules by not having that traffic light, so then everyone would be taking turns and following the right-of-way. But if there's a peace officer, police officer there, he would be directing traffic, and then you must follow him. He could be letting multiple cars through at one time, so you wouldn't just be like waiting for your turn. You would be paying attention to that peace officer and default to what he's directing traffic to do. Drivers must also yield the right of way to emergency vehicles, like it showed. And emergency vehicles can include ambulances, fire trucks, police officers, even undercovers if they have their lights on. So you have to yield the right of way to them in any situation. So even if they're driving down the road, you want to pull over, let them go through first. Or if you're at an intersection and that cop throws on his lights, but it was your turn to go, you have to stop and give him the right of way and let him proceed through first. Him or her. So here's another video that just shows how things go through an uncontrolled section. Oh wait, this might be the same video, hold on.
Uncontrolled intersections are difficult for teen drivers to...
No, so this one is, we talked about specifically about the right of way and who's the right of way, but here is also another video that demonstrates how to manage those uncontrolled intersections. And like, as a reminder, uncontrolled intersections mean they're not controlled by traffic lights or any traffic signs.
Uncontrolled intersections are difficult for teen drivers to manage because they have no stop signs or traffic lights. Teens may drive right through these intersections without paying much attention because there are no signs or traffic lights to guide them. Since there are no traffic lights or stop signs, drivers must follow the right-of-way rules of the road. These rules give one vehicle or pedestrian the privilege to pass through traffic before other road users. We'll go over some of the general right-of-way rules here. However, consult your state's driving manual to see what applies to your state. Pedestrians have the right-of-way at intersections. In general, the vehicle that arrives first at an uncontrolled intersection has the right-of-way.
Oh yeah, so it is the same video. So I just wanted to reiterate that that's what uncontrolled intersections are. They're ones where they're not being controlled by traffic lights or signs. And then in those situations, you default to the right-of-way. Just like it says, uncontrolled intersections have no traffic lights or signs, and you must yield the right-of-way. Follow these steps. Check for traffic on the left or right side. And you also need to pay attention to that it's not just other vehicles that you're paying attention to, right? You need to also look out for other road users, as it mentions, like pedestrians have the right-of-way. If there's a pedestrian approaching that intersection, even if it was your turn to go, you have to stop and let that pedestrian cross. Allow enough time and distance for you to stop. In chapter 3, we talked about stopping distance. So as you're approaching an uncontrolled intersection, you may not need to stop because it could be totally clear of any vehicles or pedestrians. However, it's always best to put yourself in a position where you are preparing to stop as you approach the intersection, just in case you do need to come to a stop and yield the right of way. So follow these rules at an intersection, and on page 58 of your guide and 59, it talks about those general right-of-way rules of which vehicle needs to yield to who. So here's that right-of-way in an illustration. There's vehicle A and vehicle B. in this situation, vehicle B would have the right of way if they showed up at the same time. And he would have the courtesy to proceed first, and car A would have the courtesy of letting him go first. Oh. So as you imagine, that's uncontrolled intersection. Controlled intersections are when they are controlled by traffic lights and traffic signs and things like that. So here is a video of how to manage controlled intersections.
Intersections are one of the most dangerous places for young drivers, and getting through them safely is an important aspect of driving. This lesson is about managing intersections with traffic signals or stop signs. Although these signs are there to control traffic, a driver must still be keenly aware of what's going on. You may encounter a driver who doesn't stop for a stop sign, is running a red light, or racing the green. Even when the intersection is controlled by signs or signals, you still need to be on the lookout for hazards. Before we discuss the steps it takes to cross an intersection, we need to discuss a concept called the point of no return. Where this point is depends on the speed your car is traveling. The faster you are traveling, the further this point is from the intersection. That's because this is the point where the driver makes the crucial decision whether or not to continue through the intersection or to make a stop. Be sure to advise your teen driver to slow down as they approach the intersection and scan up ahead for vehicles, pedestrians, or other potential hazards. If all is clear, determine if the light will stay green or if a yellow is about to turn red. At the point of no return, you make your decision to stop or to proceed. If you decide to stop, you stop at the intersections at the legal stop line. If there isn't a line, then stop just before the crosswalk or stop sign. If you decide to proceed through the intersection, you should have already slowed down prior to this point so you can react to anything. Look left, right, left again to make sure you haven't missed any pedestrians stepping into the crosswalk. If there are no pedestrians crossing and there is a safe gap between vehicles to cross, then continue through the intersection. If there are cars crossing the intersection or if the crossing traffic has the right-of-way, bring the car closer to the intersection without blocking traffic. If you are making a turn, you should make your turn from the appropriate legal lane onto the nearest legal lane. Prior to practicing how to cross an intersection, drive through a few controlled intersections and talk through the steps and what you observe. You might also have your teen driver practice going through these steps with scanning in an empty parking lot. Then, when your teen driver is ready for the residential neighborhood, have them practice the controlled intersections while applying good scanning skills. Have them point out potential hazards and explain what they did to avoid them. Just like all driving skills, it takes experience to manage intersections. Be sure your teen feels confident about being on the neighborhood roads before you move on to more high-traffic areas.
So, in your controlled intersections, your controlled intersection is where there are traffic lights and signs. They can also, controlled intersections, it's very important to pay attention because they can also be the most dangerous intersections. Even though they're controlled by traffic lights, there's often a lot of things that could be going on in an intersection, especially as they get bigger. The larger ones are definitely have the greatest potential for vehicle collisions, especially as drivers are making left-hand turns or there's pedestrians. There's just a lot of things to go along with it. Also, when the light is changing from yellow to red, those are the greatest potential for collisions as well, because vehicles that are already trying to go through that intersection, they could either speed up and to try to make that light, or slow down and stop safely. But oftentimes you get people that are really trying to get through that light sometimes, and that's where you would want to be careful in clearing that intersection, but making sure that you're clearing it or crossing through that intersection only when it's safe to do so. So you saw there was a lot of instances in that video where They really advise to not enter that intersection until you're going to make your maneuver. So you never want to put yourself into a situation where you're stuck in the middle of that intersection. Especially so even when you're coming to do a left-hand turn, sometimes you might need to creep out into the intersection a little bit just to make sure that you can see the full road where you're going to be turning into. But it's always just a good practice to not enter that intersection until you're ready to go through it and exit. So don't put yourself in a position where you're stuck in that intersection. The point of no return, it talked about that in the video. That means the greater the speed, the greater the stopping distance. We talked about that in chapter 3. So this is where that good judgment and understanding how much distance you need to stop your vehicle comes into play, because the point of no return means there's a certain point before you enter that intersection, depending on your vehicle, depending on the road conditions, depending on how fast you're going, where once you pass whatever point that is, you will not get, you're within that maximum amount of distance you need to stop, or that minimum amount of distance, sorry, to stop. So once you hit that minimum distance, and then you try to stop your vehicle, and if you don't prepare or stop soon enough, you're going to end up stopping in the intersection, or potentially sliding into the intersection, or sliding into another vehicle. So that's what the point of no return means. It means there's a certain point before you even get to that intersection where you need to start stopping. And once you get past that point, that means you're not going to give you haven't left yourself enough time to stop. And so what it means is, once you pass that point, you have to go through that intersection now. At that point, you do not have enough room to safely stop. So the best course of action is to move through that intersection. So that point of no return is really important when you're looking at traffic lights that are about to turn. So even before a traffic light turns yellow, you can look for different cues, like the crosswalk sign. If the crosswalk sign is turned from the little walking guy to the hand signal, you know that that light is about to change, because it's signaling to pedestrians that they should hurry up, they're running out of time. That can also signal to drivers that you're running out of time, the light is about to change. So those are definitely things you need to pay attention to get yourself in the best position to not end up in that intersection. So what is scanning? It talked about scanning a little bit, where you're always watching for potential hazards. And by rule of thumb, they say that drivers should be scanning every 45 seconds or a minute. Like every 45 seconds, your eye should not just be fixated on one single point in the road. You should always be moving your eyes around, checking mirrors, checking up ahead, looking at different signs that are coming up, things like that, looking for construction zones, all those sort of things. That involves scanning. That's you must always be scanning for hazards, for other vehicles, for pedestrians, for wildlife if you're on the highway. So you never want to be just fixated on one single spot. Like, you don't want to just be zoned in on the pavement on the road, because then your focus is only going to be on the road, and you're going to miss all the other things that could be happening around you and around your vehicle. So, do you guys want to break, or do you want to keep going? Somebody's got to tell me. Because we could take like a quick 5 or 10 minute break now, or we can just keep going in.
Maybe a smoke break, because I know some of them.
Yeah, give us.
Okay, so it's
break,
10:40 now. I'll give you guys 10 minutes to go refill your coffee, have a smoke, and try to be back here by 10:50. So then we'll start into lecture onto traffic circles.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yep. Okay, so traffic circles and roundabouts. These are common here in the city of Edmonton. There's definitely a few traffic circles you can find throughout the city. They're not as common in rural areas, but still, it's definitely a skill you still need to be aware of if in case you ever come across having to go through a traffic circle. There's also some intersections here in Edmonton. It is set up like a traffic circle, but they actually have lights that coordinate the traffic versus the right of way. And so those are traffic circles, but they're also the terminology used for those are called interchanges. So I'm just going to show a quick video that visually demonstrates traffic circles, and then we'll talk about them in greater detail. Well, actually, no, I'll talk about them first. So I'll flip back. So traffic circles, so the difference between a traffic circle and a roundabout is that traffic circles are generally larger. Roundabouts are smaller. So roundabouts can just be like one lane and three exits. They're usually found in more smaller like residential communities and things like that. And whereas traffic circles are definitely a lot larger and can be a little more heavier with traffic. So traffic circles, and roundabouts, they're circular intersections. So definitely a little departure from what we've previously been talking about, where intersections are two roadways that cross over each other. This one you could have multiple roadways coming in. Some traffic circles can get up to 6 or 7 different roads, all intersecting into each other. And so they are actually designed to improve traffic safety flow. Sometimes they may not seem like very safe when you first get into one. That can seem a little intimidating, but they are designed to actually slow down some of that traffic, but keep it going so that all the vehicles are moving. So you're not sitting there at a red light for a long time. You're just waiting for your turn to enter that traffic circle. Like I said, roundabouts are generally smaller. So in this image, it has different vehicles in different situations. So when you enter into or you're approaching a traffic circle, you need to prepare yourself for which way you want to go. If you are going to be going, say, just one exit, if you look down at car C, down at the bottom, car C, he's in the far right lane, and he's only going to be going one turn around. So he's just going to be going in really quickly and exiting right away on that path. Whereas beside him, car B is in the left lane, he's going to likely be going around the traffic circle to a farther exit. So if you want to go around that traffic circle farther than 1 or 2 exits, you need to be on the inside left-hand lane. If you're on the outside right-hand lane, you do need to exit within 1 or 2 exits. So this will be a lot more clear when I show you guys the video about right of way. So when we learned about the right of way, that meant you would yield to vehicles on the right. Traffic circles are opposite to that, where you yield to the vehicle on the left. So vehicles that are already in the traffic circle and to your left, they have the right of way to exit that traffic circle before you. Also, vehicles that are inside the traffic circle are in the left side if you guys are traveling at the same time. Like if you look at car H and G, they're traveling side by side. The vehicle on the left, which is G, he has the right of way and he can exit. You can see his path with his arrow. Car G is going to exit coming up soon, but H wants to keep going to the next exit. So the vehicle on the right, the H, he needs to yield the right of way to the vehicle on the left. So traffic circles are definitely different from what we've learned because their rules are very different and opposite to the right of way. Now those vehicles in the left or in the inside have the right of way. So we're going to look at a video that shows again the do's and the don'ts of a traffic circle, and it'll show you some situations of not to do because that could end up in a collision and an unsafe situation, and then at the end it'll show you the best way to manage and maneuver a traffic circle.
In a traffic circle, some common mistakes when turning 1/4 of the way around are entering into the circle and not yielding to traffic in the circle, making a right turn from the left or inside lane, exiting the circle and not yielding to pedestrians at crosswalks. For a 1/4 of the way around, the correct approach is to enter from the right or outside lane. Signal right, yield to pedestrians and traffic in the circle, proceed when safe, and exit in the right lane. A common mistake by drivers traveling halfway around is changing lanes in the traffic circle. When you enter from the left or inside lane, do not change lanes in the traffic circle and exit from the right or outside lane. This may result in cutting other vehicles off or causing a collision. To drive halfway around a traffic circle, the correct approach is to enter from the left or inside lane. Signal left, yield to pedestrians and traffic in the circle, and proceed when safe. Exit by signaling right and staying in the left or inside lane. To drive halfway around, you may also enter from the right or outside lane. Though this method is not preferred, it is permitted. Signal left, yield to pedestrians and traffic in the circle, and proceed when safe. Be sure to yield to traffic in the inside lane and exit by signaling right and staying in the right or outside lane. For a 3/4 of the way around, it's unsafe to enter or proceed around the circle from the right or outside lane. Another mistake is to change lanes in the traffic circle. When you enter from the left or inside lane, do not change lanes in the circle and exit in the right or outside lane. This may result in cutting other vehicles off or causing a collision. For a 3/4 of the way around, the correct approach is to enter from the left or inside lane. Signal left, yield to pedestrians and traffic in the circle, and then proceed when safe. Exit by signaling right and staying in the left or inside lane.
So, as you can see, there's definitely a lot of errors you can make within a traffic circle, and we definitely want to avoid that situation. On page 61, reviews those rules that we saw, are those ways to maneuver through traffic circles. But the best important things that I took from that video is that you need to yield to traffic on the left. Also need to pay attention to pedestrians. Pedestrians could be crossing through that traffic circle. So most of the time I see with drivers is they come up and they're so focused on looking to the left at the vehicles in the traffic circle already, they can often fail to look back to the right side and see if pedestrians are coming up and are intending to cross. Not only pedestrians too, cyclists. I kept saying the weather's nice and there's lots of people riding their bikes nowadays. So you always need to make sure anytime you're going to move your vehicle into an intersection, you need to be looking both ways. And that's the same rule that applies to traffic circles. You do need to really pay attention to the vehicles inside and make sure that you have a good space to enter and have a good gap to get in between those vehicles. And you also need to still be checking your right side of your vehicle as well for other hazards or road users. The other thing that was really important from that video was you are not permitted to do a lane change within a traffic circle. So when you approach that traffic circle, you definitely need to make sure you're in the right lane already, because that's the lane you're going to be exiting with. You're never in a situation where you're going to be cutting across lanes, because that can put other vehicles in a dangerous situation and potentially cause a collision. So one thing you can rely on also for other vehicles is they should not be changing lanes within that intersection as well. Everybody should enter into that lane and exit in whatever lane they started with. And then it's really important to use your signals properly in a traffic circle. You want to signal to the left as your intent to enter into the traffic circle, and you leave that left-hand signal on until you intend to exit. So as you're approaching your exit, then you would turn your signal on to the right-hand signal to show other drivers that you're preparing to exit at the next exit point. So you want to keep using that signal the whole way through the traffic circle. You want to leave it left to show drivers that you're still going left until you're ready to leave. So those signals are really important in traffic circles because there could be a vehicle behind you who's traveling a little faster than you, or he's beside you on his right hand, but he needs to know when you're ready to exit so he can yield safely to you. Any specific questions on traffic circles? Or I know that some people think they're confusing or they're a little daunting when you first encounter them with your vehicle, but if you remember those rules, you'll be able to get through them nice and quickly and safely. You guys are welcome to take off your mic and stop me at any point, right? Like you don't have to wait until the end to ask a question or anything. If there's anything that's not totally clear, just let me know. Or if I need to go over it again, then that's totally fine. So we have seen a little bit of turning, but here we're going to go into some more specifics. What are the steps of when you are going to turn your vehicle, whether it's a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn? Here are the situation or the steps you take to prepare for a turn. There's a lot that goes into the turn before the turn even happens. So many collisions are caused by drivers who fail to make turns properly, and that means they're either missing a step, they're signaling too late, or they're not judging the other vehicles properly, or they're moving too quickly. There's a lot of things that can go into a turn that can make it unsafe and cause a collision due to driver error or drivers moving too quickly, or they're forgetting, they're trying to skip steps, things like that. So it's really important to follow these things when you are making a turn. Here are some hints for safe turning, or like I said, the steps. Always checking for traffic well in advance. And that's traffic not only ahead of you, but also behind you. Remember we talked about checking your rear view mirror, doing a shoulder check to either side of your vehicle. So checking your blind spots, making sure there's no one there, and signaling your intent to turn, whether it's right or left. And then when safe, moving into that proper lane well in advance. As we talked in chapter 2, paying attention to those lane designation signs or those lane usage signs can really help put you in a position where you're already in the lane that you need to be in to make your turn, and you're not cutting across multiple lanes of traffic at the last second. Another tip is signaling is insufficient time to provide reasonable warning to other drivers. So not signaling too late so that other vehicles can adjust or maybe let you into that lane so they know you intend to turn. Also not signaling too early. If you signal too early, vehicles might think that you're turning, at another roadway or something, or you're intending to do a U-turn or something like that. So making sure that you've given enough time for drivers to understand that you're turning, but not too advanced that you confuse them. Make turns at a slow speed and keep your vehicle under control. That's one thing that new drivers, I know me, when I was a new driver, when I was doing left-hand turns, I was trying to get through that intersection really fast, really quickly. And so my vehicle was definitely going way too fast. And there's a point where I came up on two wheels. That was a scary situation. That's definitely not what you want to do. As much as you want to go through those intersections quickly, you also don't want to go so fast that you're not having good control of your vehicle. So get used to what's a good speed, usually around like 20, maybe 30 kilometers an hour, right around in that range, slow enough that you're you have good control over your vehicle, but also not so slow that you're holding people up. Like if you're just crawling through at 5 kilometers an hour, that can be unsafe too. So finding that proper speed to get through that intersection is important as well. When turning left or right, stay in that turning lane. So just like traffic circles, even in intersections where you're in the far left lane and then you're going to turn into that far left lane on the other road. Same thing on right-hand turns. When you're doing a right-hand turn, you're on the far right-hand lane by the sidewalk. You want to stay in that right-hand lane closest to the sidewalk as much as you possible. And then if there's some vehicles up ahead, you can safely shoulder check and move into the left-hand lane when you need to. But you always want to make your turn into the same lane that you are turning from. If there are pedestrians in the crosswalk, do not turn until they have completely left the crosswalk. You see it a lot where drivers will, especially in larger intersections, they'll go really quickly to either beat that pedestrian, or as soon as that pedestrian's just outside of their vehicle, then they'll go. But legally, there's certain rules where, I mean, the general rule of thumb is you should wait until that pedestrian is fully out of that crosswalk. But if you're in a situation where it's a really large crosswalk, if that pedestrian is 2 car lengths away from you, you can proceed if they're walking towards you. If they're walking away from you, you can usually get away with it if they're 1 lane away. But those are really situations where you don't, like if you really, it's super busy and you really got to get going, but most of the time, just wait. That extra couple seconds of waiting for a pedestrian to exit and fully, safely get out of the crosswalk isn't going to make or break you to your meeting. Like a couple minutes or a couple seconds, just a few seconds isn't going to overall change your overall driving distance. So just be patient on those turns as well. Only go through when it's really, really safe to do so. Don't try to push it too much because you don't want to put yourself in an unsafe situation. So here's a video that demonstrates more of what I was talking about a shoulder check, checking your blind spots, things like that, using your mirrors as you're going into a turn. Uh-oh.
Good turning technique means maintaining a safe speed and staying in the lane during the turn. Skillful turns will keep your teen driver out of the way of oncoming traffic and keep the car under control. We highly recommend you review the next lessons about intersections and right-of-way before you practice this lesson. In most cases, turning happens at intersections, so it's better to be prepared knowing all you can before you hit the neighborhood. Getting back to learning about turns, a common error for teen drivers is to enter the turn too fast. Encourage your teen driver to slow down and use the brake to control their speed as they go through the turn. Another common error for teen drivers is oversteering. This may happen if the teen driver is gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Have them keep a firm yet relaxed grip on the wheel. Oversteering can also be caused by teens not knowing how far to steer. Practice will take care of this error. Be sure you discuss how important lane positions are to turning in traffic. Being in the correct lane position communicates your turning intentions to other drivers, improves your line of sight, and puts your vehicle in the best position for your turning maneuver. Lane position 1 is the position in the center of the lane. We've already discussed how this is the best position for normal driving conditions. Positions 2 or 3 are where you'd want to be if you're planning to turn, change lanes, or park. As you get closer to the intersection, your lane may be widened into an approach leg for either a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn. It's important to direct your car into the correct lane so traffic can get by you as you slow down for your turn. Let's go over the basic steps for turns in intersections. Determine which way you're going to turn and turn your directional signal on. Check your mirrors and the blind spot on the side toward your turn. Slow down just prior to the turn. Enter the appropriate turn lane if one is available. Scan for vehicles, pedestrians, and potential hazards. As you come up to the corner, be prepared to stop just in case. Look as far ahead as possible into the lane that you are turning into to make sure the road is clear. Move smoothly and turn the wheel simultaneously. Accelerate to the appropriate speed for the traffic and the conditions, and you've safely executed your turn. In this activity, take the wheel first and do a commentary drive through a few turns and explain to the teen driver as you do each step. Then, hand the wheel over to the teen driver and have them practice good turning technique while following the rules of intersections and right-of-way. As we suggested in the beginning of this lesson, it's best to view those lessons prior to practicing turns. If you're unsure how to conduct a commentary drive, check out the video at this link before you head for your car.
Okay, so that showed you different situations of when you're turning and how to prepare yourself in advance. Like I keep saying, be proactive driver where you're looking ahead and planning out your route of where you want to go. So two-way traffic or two-way left turning lanes. This is where that center lane is shared. So I briefly showed you guys this in chapter 2 when we were talking about road markings. This is a situation where you have arrows that are paved on the road or in a certain lane. So this is demonstrating to you that that center lane, these two vehicles are both using that center lane even though they're going in opposite directions. And they're using it to make a left-hand turn. So this is called a two-way left turn lane. You can cross over that solid line just to get into that left-hand turning lane, but not to use it. You can't use this center lane as a passing lane. It's only intended for vehicles that are going to stop and make a left-hand turn. So you can see the driver in the far right, he's trying to turn into a driveway. Say he's pulling into his house. So he would have approached that, let's see if you can see my mouse. He would have come in this way. Maybe I can do the annotation. Yeah, annotate. So I got a pencil here. I'll show you as that driver. He's coming across in blue, and then he enters this lane after the arrow on this side. So he didn't get into that lane at the intersection. He came in after, and only when he was right at that arrow point to make his turn to go into the driveway. Now, this vehicle, the other one, he would have come, the red here, he would have come this way, and then he would have entered into that center lane here to make his left-hand turn at the intersection. So you can see how both of these vehicles could have been in a dangerous situation if either one of them came into that shared centered lane too early. Then they could have been in a situation of a head-on collision. So these center lanes are really important for you to pay attention, and you're only entering it to do a left-hand turn, and you're only entering it when you're ready to do your left-hand turn. I see these again, they have these center lines on 97th Street here in Edmonton on the north side. You can, they use these shared turning lanes all throughout because there's lots of businesses on that side down 97th Street past Yellowhead, just north of it, on your way to Northgate. These shared center lanes are used all the time, and that's a really busy road. So even if it's rush hour traffic and it's really congested and you're like, oh, I'm so close to my turn, I just want to get in there, and then you pull in too early just because you're a little impatient and you just want to get past everybody, that is not what that's intended to be for and be used for. And you can definitely be caught and get a hefty fine for doing that because you're putting other vehicles in harm's way, right? And yourself. So two-way left turn lanes, just be mindful. Both vehicles can be using those from either direction. So you don't have to wait until it's totally empty. You can start signaling, but only use that lane when you're ready to and when it's safe to do so. Don't use it as a passing lane. Don't use it just as like, hey, it's a clear lane, I'm just going to use this one. It's only used for turning. But they can be very dangerous because you have multiple users using it from either direction. So use those ones with caution and make sure you're using them properly. Oh, I got to clear out my drawings. Okay, so four-way stop signs. We talked about these types of intersections. These are called four-way stops. They can also be called courtesy corners. You might see that term come up on your road exam. If they're talking about a courtesy corner, that's meaning there's a four-way stop. And to qualify for that, you have an intersection where there's four roadways, and each one of them have a stop sign. Vehicles approaching from all directions are required to come to a full stop. So each one of these vehicles, you have A, B, and C. They are all there crossing through, but as you can see, car A, he's signaling to go left. So each vehicle has come to a full stop. And the normal courtesy is to allow the vehicle that arrived first to proceed. Because all corners have a stop sign, you would default to the right-of-way rules. So whoever got there first gets to go first. If the two vehicles arrive at the same time, again, you allow the vehicle on the right to proceed first. So in this situation, say all three vehicles got there at the same time, A, B, and C. Who has the right of way first? The car on the far right is C. So he gets to go over B. So he's going straight. And then B, once C's cleared, then B would go. He's going straight. And then A would get to go, and he's going left. So you can see there, that's just everybody took their turn, but they all went through the right-of-way rules first. U-turns. So U-turns are when you turn your vehicle around at an intersection, and you're turning your vehicle around and you're using traffic lanes where they have opposite traffic traveling in that direction. So U-turns can be very dangerous because there could be oncoming vehicles coming towards you, and you're moving really slowly trying to whip around and go the same flow of traffic. So they're not very easily to maneuver. U-turns, they're not as easy as merging or simply turning. They're definitely more dangerous because you're crossing over into oncoming traffic lanes. Also, depending how big your vehicle is, your vehicle could swing out quite far and go over multiple lanes just to make a full U-turn. So you'll see that U-turns are not often permitted in intersections, and most situations, especially bigger intersections, you're going to see no U-turns allowed. But this can be also used on different roadways, alleyways, things like that, where they prohibit the use of U-turns. On page 67, it kind of talks about different U-turns. You are not allowed to do a U-turn in an intersection, for sure. You can't do it where the sign prohibits it. Also in urban areas, U-turns are not permitted on roadways between intersections, on alley intersections, where one or more of the roadway is on an access to a public or private parking lot. And then outside urban areas, if you're on a highway or traveling to different cities, you can't do a U-turn on a curve. And that's because other vehicles will not be able to see you. And if they're traveling on a highway, they're going at high distances. They won't have enough time to stop once they do see you doing that U-turn. So can't be doing U-turns on curbs where other vehicles can't see what you're doing. And you cannot do them when you're approaching or nearing the top of a hill. If you're going over a hill, can't do U-turns there either because vehicles on the other side of the hill won't be able to see you. So that's the end of chapter 4. I went over a lot of different things, but just to review, throughout chapter 4, we had learned about the right-of-way. We learned about intersections, both controlled and uncontrolled intersections, what that means, what defines a controlled intersection versus an uncontrolled. Uncontrolled doesn't have signs or lights. We learned about four-way stops or courtesy corners. Uncontrolled intersections, T intersections, I talked about a little briefly. T-intersections are where you don't have vehicles coming from all 4 directions. They're only coming from 3 directions. But the same rules would still apply to a T-intersection. Pay attention to who has a stop sign or a yield sign or even traffic lights. And if there's no signs at a T-intersection, then you still use the right-of-way rules. Talked about the point of no return as you're approaching intersections, giving yourself enough time to stop before your vehicle enters that intersection. That's the point of no return. Talked about traffic circles and roundabouts and how to enter and exit them safely. Talked about turning, the usage of turning lanes and that 2-way left-hand